Hello guys, and welcome back to part 2 of our new modelling series, our tutorial on modelling this Suzuki truck, this cute little pickup truck out of Japan. In the last episode we set up our image planes, we set up our Maya scenes so that we have everything ready to actually start modelling. So that's what we're going to do. I don't know how many episodes this will end up being for the modelling part, maybe a few here and there, but today we're just going to start with blocking out the model itself. Blocking, if you're not familiar with the term, is essentially, as the name implies, you block it out of simple shapes like a cube that we're going to start with, and then we're going to form that into the basic shape of the cabin, the cab, whatever the technical term is, of the truck. It is going to be quite blocky and simple, and that's why it's called blocking. And the reason why we start out really simple is because it gives us more of a blank canvas to then work into. You know, if we started really high poly, then it would make it much harder to deform things if we made any mistakes with the actual proportions, which is one of the most important parts to get right at this stage. So let's get right into it. What I like to do normally is start with our side view. So I'm just going to create a cube and go ahead and scale this up. Okay, we're currently in wireframe mode, and if you remember last time we made the scale box, we can just go ahead and hide that for the time being because we don't need that right now. I like to have shaded mode on in perspective, but actually in the views like this I like to have wireframe mode on, just because it allows us to see our reference a little bit easier, and we can manipulate our model just better to match the reference overall. One last thing I'm actually going to do that I forgot to do in the last episode is I'm going to select our image planes, and I'm going to come over to the right hand side here, and I'm just going to press this button to create a new display layer. What this will allow us to do, if I press this box twice until it goes from T to then R, that means reference. So if I go and select it in the viewport now, I no longer can, and it means we won't have any accidental selections while we're trying to work from our side views. We can still select them from the outliner though, so don't worry if you need to move them or make any changes or hide them for whatever reason. Okay, we can also just go ahead and name this something like ref layer or whatever you like. Sorry, you can't have spaces, my bad. Ref underscore layer. Okay, so from the side view, we are just going to scale this up. I'm not going to do this little nubbins up here first, just because that will be an extra addition. Whenever you're modeling, you kind of want to model how things are made in real life, ultimately at the end anyway. So by that I mean, if something is a separate piece in real life, you want it to be a separate piece of geometry, and oftentimes that will just make your life easier. Sometimes it's okay to model things as one piece, but oftentimes you will have to split it out anyway, and that actually makes your life a bit easier anyway in the end. So I'm going to take this cube, and we're just going to go to our different views, and we're going to scale this out to match the size. It looks like our reference is lining up pretty nicely, as kind of crusty as it is, which is good. I was quite worried it wasn't going to. So we have this basic shape blocked in, and now what we can start doing is adding some edge loops to start defining the shape a little bit more. And this is a process you really want to take as much time as you can doing, because if you have the proportions right, and if your blocking model is good, everything else is going to be so much easier. If you did the ship modeling course with us, you'll know how much of an easier time you're going to have if your blocking is really solid. So spend as much time as you need to there. You know, if it takes you longer than it takes me, don't worry about that at all. That is 100% okay. Alright. So we're just keeping this real simple right now. Just kind of trying to get the vertices to line up with the different areas. And, you know, obviously there's parts which aren't quite aligned, but that's okay. We're just trying to, like, we're working with what we have to begin with, to get things to be aligned properly. One thing I like to do, actually, at this stage, is I'll go ahead and add a edge loop running down the middle from the front, so that we can actually delete one side of this, because while there likely is going to be some asymmetry here, it's probably not going to be that big of a deal, and we can just add it later. So essentially we want to model it symmetrical first, and the best way to do that really is just to delete one side and start working into it that way. So we can see here this comes in some, so we'll go ahead and do that, and then also it comes down a little bit. Okay. So you can see that's now lining up with this line, and we're just starting to work into the shape. Okay, maybe we'll bring this forward like that. Okay, and then we're going to have to add some sort of bevel here. I often like to do that with just adding my own loops. Or we could also just select these edges and then just go ahead and bevel them. And then tweak it a bit ourselves. Maybe let's come to this view up here. Add 2 segments. I'm just going to, if for whatever reason when you're adjusting the fraction, you can see here this is adjusting very, very quickly. You have this little like pie chart thing up here. You can just right click that and then change the amount to something like slow. And that will just decrease the amount that's changing overall. And then we just want to get this to kind of align with the curvature here. We seem to be having an issue with our front side reference. We might actually be modeling in the wrong direction. Oh yeah, we are. Look at that. Okay, the reason why that's happening is probably because we have our reference facing the wrong way. There we go. Let's turn these around real quick. Okay, so we just moved this a little so that we can actually see the front now instead. And then we'll just move this to the back so this isn't actually interfering with our model from the front view. And there we have it. Okay, so we can see that we've added that bevel in, and that appears to be matching from our top view for the most part, and the side view somewhat. I'm always going back and kind of double checking the reference. Like I can see here the line of where this headlight is kind of where the curve seems to stop. By the looks of it, but then the curve becomes less extreme up here. So that's something we're going to want to tweak. So we can do that literally just by pulling the vertices around now. Like so. Okay, and this is why we're keeping it really low poly, just so we don't have a hard time tweaking much of this stuff. Okay, we also have a bit of a curve getting introduced here. So we'll do the same thing. Also just want to make sure that our curvature here is looking good. So move some things around if you need to. Okay. I'm just going to soften the normals on this just because I don't like seeing those harsh edges. Even though it doesn't actually do much for us right now. Okay, we have a bit of a curve up here as well. So we can go ahead and add that in. Just making sure. I'm really, really taking my time here as I do this. Just making sure everything's looking right. I don't want any weirdness. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and pull this up to match. Okay, and you can see here this is all going to have to come in, but that's something we'll get to in a minute. We're still just taking care to block out the shape of this for the time being. Okay, and don't worry about these back faces for now, they're not too important. But you can see here we're starting to get the shape defined of the actual cabin. One of the things I like to do early on, just because it's an easy win, is start adding in the wheel arches. I mean, this is a relatively simple part to do just because it's quite flat. So what I like to do normally to get the shape of that is actually trace around a cylinder. It's a bit of an old school way of doing it, but it works quite well for me. I will probably make this something like 8 divisions for now, just so we don't go too high. And then we'll just make sure that our vertices here are lining up with the extreme, or like the most extreme end, like where the actual wheel portion ends, that panel. Something like here. Okay, once I'm happy with that, I can just go ahead and add a vertice, and then I can literally just trace the outline of this. Like so. Okay, then we no longer need our cylinder. We'll then pull this across underneath. If you're wondering how I'm getting this to snap like this with this green line, use the multi-cut tool, hold down Control and Shift, and then Enter to complete that. You can also, you could just do it by hand, but then, you know, you're not going to get a 100%. You can see that percentage down there, you know, for the degree. You're not going to get an exact line, so I like to hold Control and Shift for that. Okay, I'm also just going to go ahead and delete these bottom parts here, because we don't need them right now. One thing we can do now that we've done that is we can actually lift this part up here, because that is higher than the bit back here. And then we'll just adjust our wheel arch a little bit to match. Okay, so we are making some pretty good progress. Let's have a look and see what we can do next. So one thing I can see here is that while this edge here, this curve is kind of matching, this interior curve should actually be pretty significantly reduced. It should probably be a bit less extreme. So we'll come in and just make sure that that radius is being followed. We'll try and get like a happy midpoint for these lines. Okay, if you're not sure what I'm doing here, I'm just, I have it keybound, but essentially what's happening is this face is becoming kind of non-planar. It's not really going in completely one direction, and we want it to right now. Eventually we'll have some curve to it, but we don't want it to be kind of like having one vertex out of plane, right? We want it to be perfectly shaped. So in order to bring that back, I'm going to double click the translate tool, and I'm just going to click edit pivot and then snap it or align it to this face. And I'm going to press R to go to scale, and I'm just going to scale this way and Y, and that will flatten it and make it planar again. It's just a little trick to make sure things aren't going kind of wrong, because we really don't want this to lose its shape. We want it to remain planar, if that makes sense. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that shape. I think we're nearly ready to add some divisions to this and start cutting into it so we can make the windshield and so on. We're just going to do a few last little bits of clean up. I'm going to pull this out to the side a bit more so that's matching. I think for the time being I might delete these back faces here. Just going to double check our reference to see if that's the correct thing to do. Yeah, I think we can add that afterwards. Honestly, that would be a separate piece anyway, so I'd rather that not interfere with what we're doing. Just make sure everything is in the right planes. I like to keep, I'm also going to do the same like reverse scale tricks here just because I like to keep these flat and level. And you can see we're really taking our time with this, right? Like we're, what, 16 minutes in? Probably like 13 minutes of actual modeling. And it looks like we've not really made too much progress, but that's okay. We really don't want to rush this too much. Okay, you can see here we're getting a bit of an issue with the reference. So here it looks like our the point of our curve ends where the light ends, but then here it doesn't. So this is one of the annoying parts about using any kind of blueprints online, is that they'll often be wrong, or they won't match from every angle. Normally because they're not actual technical drawings, and we talked about this in our ship modeling tutorial as well. They're not actually technical drawings. Unless you can get them from like a specific model. Like with ships it's a bit more easy because people are actually making technical drawings for these to go together, but the quality of them varies, so you're going to get things that don't quite match, so you kind of just have to play it by ear and be careful and kind of do an in-between if it doesn't quite line up from every single angle. Okay, I can see here from the side, this part here isn't quite lining up as much as I'd like to. So I want this edge here to be following kind of the exterior edge of where the frame meets where the windshield starts. So we're just going to tweak some of this here. And these faces here are actually coming out further than we want them to be, but that's okay because we're going to delete those anyway. We won't be keeping those. And we just want to make sure this curve is being maintained as much as possible. Okay, and again, we'll just reverse scale this so that it stays planar, and it is. Okay, we can probably get away with moving this up a bit. Not too much, we're losing some of the curve. And this is why I'm keeping it really, really simple again, just because at this point, like, you are just going to have to move around vertices individually. It's kind of just a tricky part of this, but if we had way more vertices than this, it would create a massive headache for us, and we don't want to have to deal with that. So that's why we're keeping it low. Okay, and you can see I'm just making sure these line up with the extent of our windshield. And then going back to perspective just to make sure that looks okay. So there's a lot of jumping backwards and forwards from perspective and then orthographic views. Now we want to make sure this is lining up. Okay, if we hadn't have caught that there, that would have caused us massive headaches later on. That's better than it was. Again, just making sure this is flat. There we go. And this one as well. Okay, we'll just do another quick double check over this. Okay, I'm pretty satisfied that that is all lining up. We've got one more to tweak down here. We're going to bring this down just so this is hitting the bottom of the windshield. And this here, and then we'll go ahead and tweak this corner afterwards so we can build that in. But for the time being, I just want to cut these shapes out so that they fit in. And we're going to make sure that's matching from this angle, which you can see it is. Looks like this top image here is a bit of a dud, but we can use it just for proportions. For everything else, the front and side is going to do us just fine. Maybe we'll pull this back slightly. And then we'll pull this forward a bit. You're probably thinking at this point, God, just like get on with it. But it really, really is very important that we take as much time as we need to here. Because I've definitely rushed this stage before and it's not been good. Okay, we can probably bring this over a little bit as well. Maybe have that line up there. Okay, great. I'm pretty happy with that. I think we can go ahead and delete these windshield pieces. Like so. Okay, and now we have the cutout for that piece. And then we can potentially cut out this side panel too in a moment. One thing I am considering is if this side of the window here has any curve to it. And I think it does, but it's very mild. So I'm just going to bring that back for the time being. This side here might need, like right now it's just going straight up, but we might need to add some curve to it. So we'll just have a quick look at that. I'm just holding down to add that directly in the middle. I'm holding down Control with the multi-cut tool selected and just doing middle mouse click, and that's adding that in the middle. Okay, I'm just going to flatten this. If you're wondering how I'm getting that to slide, I wouldn't just do this because you can see it's changing the shape. Hold down Control and Shift. That will then slide the vertices to go perfectly level, which is what I want to have happen here. And then I think we're just going to pull this out ever so slightly. Just to introduce some curvature there. That will mean now that we have to tweak this a little bit, but that's okay. This I want to remain planar. And same for this one as well. Okay, we'll try to make that even. Okay, and then we'll keep that edge there. Okay, now that we've added our little bit of curvature there, I think we're okay to go ahead and delete these faces again. So let's do that. Okay, there's one other thing that I think we need to do, and that's in removing the windshield, we've kind of lost this rounded part here on the side, and I think we can make a few tweaks here too. So I'm going to pull this down a little bit. And then pull this in slightly, because I think this is coming out a little too far. And this might be able to come back a little, or come up a little bit. Okay, and I might pull this down here, and then this maybe come down a bit too. I'm just starting to be very, very conscious of our shapes now. Because that is very, very important. We have that come back out a bit. Okay, yeah, so we've lost some of the roundness here from one of the pillars. So, at least I think that's what they're called. I didn't know what they were called for the longest time, but I think they're called pillars. We're going to create another edge loop in here that we can pull out to add our curvature. I'm just going to make sure those lines line up with something on the blueprints, just so that's not looking too funky. Okay, maybe something like that. Okay, and then we can go ahead and join these up. Just edit the topology a little bit. Okay, and then we'll pull this out slightly. Just to bring some of that curve back in. And maybe pull that a little forward. Okay, we're just trying to make sure that all our lines are flowing nicely. Okay, cool. Let's go ahead and cut out the shape for our side window as well. So it looks like it comes up at a bit of an angle here, so we'll just create some vertices with the multi-cut tool. This looks like it's going to come down. The whole time I'm doing this, guys, I'm also looking at my reference. Just to double check things as well if there's anything wrong with the blueprints. So this looks like it's going to come down to around about here. Something like that. Okay, that looks like it needs to go further forward actually, to around about here. And maybe that rounds off afterwards. Okay, so again, we're still just tweaking vertices at this point, just making sure the shapes are right, the distances between things look right. It's a very, very slow and tedious process, but an important one. I'm probably repeating myself at this point, but it's very, very imperative that we get this correct. Okay, it's tricky to see on the blueprints here because we have this piece that kind of comes up like this kind of sun shield here. So I'm trying to see where this exactly should end. I think maybe up around here. Something like that, yeah. Okay. And then that will come to around about here, and then we'll come straight down. Okay, so now we need to do a bit of cleanup because we need to make sure these things here align properly. So we're going to do our reverse scale and slide trick just to make sure that these line up. And that's going in a straight line. unless it's not supposed to, which looks like it's not. It has a bit of a curve to it. I would highly recommend that you set a hotkey for edit pivot. You can come up to do that by going to a Windows, General Editors, and then where is it? Sorry, Windows Settings and Preferences, and then Hotkey Editor, and then you can search for Edit Pivot or Set Pivot. Which one is it? Pivot. Okay, so you're looking for Enter, Edit, Pivot Mode Press. This one, if you just select this and then set your hotkey to whatever, I have it set to D and then press Save, because a lot of time when I'm editing vertices or anything else on this model, I want it to follow the already existing curvature of things. So if I wanted to move this vertice, and I wanted it to follow this line up here exactly, I could just press D on my keyboard, align it to that edge, and then it will just, you know, move along that edge only, just because that's where the pivot point is aligned to. So I would highly recommend that you do that. You can also do Control-Shift to get it to slide in that direction too, but both are useful for different reasons. Okay, so we are pretty happy with that, I would say. Just double checking our reference to make sure everything's looking pretty good. Okay, so we can go ahead and delete those faces. So we're starting to look like a truck, a bit like a PS1 truck, but a truck. But that's okay, all in due time. We'll clean up this topology now. Make sure this has nice flowing edges going in straight lines so that nothing gets too funky. Okay, there we go. Alright, I'm going to start cleaning up some of the rest of the topology now. So holding on Control and Shift with the multi-cut tool selected, and I'm going to come up here and just join those edges up. These ones here, we could be tempted to just join those like so, but for the time being I don't think that's really the right thing to do because we have an edge going across here, so maybe we'll add an extra loop going in here. This looks like on the reference to be kind of a indent rather than an actual panel line, so we'll go ahead and add just a single edge loop in the middle to make our kind of dividing line there. Okay, and then maybe we'll have an extra edge here. So because we're getting to a point now where I'm a bit more happy with the shape of things, I'm starting to add a few more loops now. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with this. We can go and connect those up. These loop edges here are probably going to be temporary because I think we might need to round these off. I'm not 100% certain yet. We'll go ahead and add an edge loop running along here. We'll have that come all the way down in a straight line too. And then join that back up just so this terminates nicely. Okay, we don't really want very, very long edges going across long distances. Especially in corners like this. Okay, so if we smooth this now, we're not getting any weirdness, but it isn't really holding the shape very nicely. So there's some things here that we'll have to do to make sure it does. And we're not out of the woods yet. We still have a long way to go. Okay, what can we do next? Okay, next thing I want to do is this area here is supposed to be round like this, but the way the geometry here isn't really working very well for us, and this is not something I would recommend. Like having, if you're going to have a curve like this, you don't really want it to be a pole. I suppose it's not really, like it's almost a pole being kind of if like 5 or more edges are converging. I don't really like this because it kind of subdivides a bit weird. I think a much better way to have our corner would be to actually replace these edges with something more like this, and have this one come up here, and we delete these two. That just works a bit cleaner, and then when we subdivide, that also resolves a bit nicer as well. And you can see it is actually supposed to have a curve to it anyway, so we'll just tweak that a bit, and that resolves a lot nicer. This here is also a little uneven, so we're going to pull that around. Okay, there we go, and then that's looking a lot cleaner already. That's lining up quite nicely from the side here. Okay, we might be able to do the same thing up here. I'm going to add a holding edge here, making sure to keep our edges kind of nice and square. Actually, we'll go ahead and delete that. Something that I want to address is the shapes are kind of lining up pretty nicely here. We'll just pull that out a little so that curve is just being followed. But one thing that's not matching very well is this pillar on the front. You can see here we're meant to be having a lot more of a curve round. So we're going to go ahead and have to tweak this a little, which could be a little fiddly. But we'll just start with this middle one here, and we'll pull that to the side. You can see that's still in the correct place here, but on the front now it's now matching where that pillar is supposed to be, and you can see it's disrupting quite a lot of the flow here. So that's going to be a little tricky to tweak, but again, that's why we're keeping it simple. And it means we'll also have to move some of these around here as well, because this is no longer lining up too well. But this is why we add in these important parts here, like the windshield. We cut that out because then we can kind of more evenly, we can start separating it out into pieces, removing the parts we don't need, and working out the shape. You know, it's kind of like hard surface is different obviously to sculpting, but you're kind of also at the same time, you are sort of sculpting the shape in a way. So if we pull that in now, that's now matching a bit better. We are getting some pretty ugly topology here. Or shape of things, at least. Okay, we're gonna have to tweak that a little bit there. But then we'll pull this in as well. Just looking at our front view, making sure that's kind of coming over the right amount. And then the same here as well. And we're just making sure that's also lining up still here, which it is. Okay, we'll do a quick smooth preview just to make sure that's still looking okay. We are getting some weirdness here now. It could mean that we need to pull this up a little. Maybe this will all have to come in. Not exactly. Something like that. Okay, no. They would pull that one out instead. Okay, then we can probably pull that up some. Okay, so we're still being very, very careful. This is still subdividing reasonably nicely. We are getting a very, very slight crease there, but that's okay. We can work on that. So the reason why I'm smooth previewing this with free on the keyboard, if you didn't know how to do that, is because it while the shape isn't deforming the way it should finally, it's kind of showing me whether or not we're getting any weird shading artifacts, right? Because we want this to look smooth. You know, these things aren't handmade, they're made by machines. Obviously there are going to be some minor differences, but they're not going to have these big kind of like defects in them. So we want to just roll over it and make sure that the reflections look normal, nothing looks too weird. Okay, let's deal with this area up here now. I think I want to go ahead and add... we're going to edit this area up here, because this is getting a bit funky. And not in a good way. I want to tweak this. Okay, so I'm going to add an extra edge loop in there. And a really great tool within Maya is, if I have that edge selected, I hold down Shift, and then go to Edit Edge Flow, it's going to automatically kind of interpolate between the two and update that curvature. We won't do that just yet, because we need to actually have this edge run all the way around first. Okay, and I'm actually going to add an extra edge loop in here. Add this cut in like that. And I'll add another one in here. Okay, and then we'll just clean this up so that this join is a bit nicer. Oh, we seem to have accidentally made an n-gon. So if you're not aware, an n-gon is just a shape that has, or a face that has more than 4 edges. You don't really want them, they're just going to create shading artifacts and they're not really helpful. So we need to do a bit of cleanup now. So I'm going to go ahead and edit edge flow on this. Because now things are getting fiddly as we're getting a bit higher poly, and we really want to make sure that none of this looks weird. So we're getting some shading artifacts here. So things are kind of shaped how I would like. But it could be better. Okay, to fix this n-gon, let's do a bit of tweaking here to this shape. We're going to have to add an extra edge loop running through here, but that's okay. And then we can just edit the edge flow here to try and bring some of that curvature back. Okay. So it's nearly perfect. But we're getting some weirdness here in the reflections. These aren't quite as nice as I would like them to be. And also this corner here is causing us some issues. I think that's probably because it's dipped in so much like this. Which is not what we want. So we need to figure out how to fix that. Okay, so there's probably going to be some tweaking that we need to do here. I don't like how far this curve comes around. That looks a bit strange to me, and I think when we add a windshield, that's not going to look right. So we'll revisit that. The last thing we'll do is we'll just add a few more divisions to this wheel base here, because it is quite low. And to fix that, we will... I'm going to use the multi-cut tool. I'm just going to hold down Shift just to put those in the middle. So we'll clean up the topology quickly. And put that in the middle. And then we'll just go ahead and slide these out until they match the curvature. Okay, there we go. And then just for the sake of it, just to see what it's looking like, we'll just put that across the other side. Okay, so that's not looking too bad. We are starting to get the shape in there. There's a few things we need to figure out. This part here is looking quite nice. This here is quite nice. The wheelbase is nice. The part here where this juts out like this, not the best. We're going to have to go in and fix that, but we'll leave that till the next episode, which will either be on next Monday or Wednesday, where we'll fix that. I'll look into that in the meantime. And yeah, I hope you've enjoyed the tutorial so far. Feel free to go ahead if you feel like you can. If not, just sit tight and the next one will come along soon. Thank you very much for watching. Please like and subscribe. Let us know if you have any questions in the comments or any feedback or advice and so on. Always happy to hear that kind of thing as well. And yeah, until next time, I'll see you later.